So I'm here with Lewis Ide. Hello, Lewis, and thank you for being here. Lewis went through our Quality of Mind program and has made some significant changes. And so we're using this dialogue opportunity just to explore various elements of how he's shifted. And we want to do that in a way that provides value to anyone that's listening. So thank you for being here, Lewis, and would love to just start off by you sharing a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and look, thanks, Martin, for having me, and a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So yeah, as you say, so I'm Lewis. So I currently work for a company called Form3. So we're a financial technology company. And I've been there actually, well, only for 6 months. So just celebrated my 6-month anniversary, and thankfully just passed my probation, which is very good. And I run a division of the business around our international payments services. So looking at everything from the go-to-market strategy, sales, leadership, to bring a sort of product to market. And prior to that, I spent a number of years working for Swift, where I ran the UK and Ireland business and ran quite a large sales team there. So I've been in the financial services sector for probably coming up to about 10 years now, which has been very exciting. So yeah.
Great. And when did you do the Quality of Mind program, or give us a little bit more context around your development journey?
Yeah, of course. So maybe if I take a sort of a step back to maybe my career before I jumped into kind of financial services. So from a very young age, in fact, I think from as early as I can remember, and probably as early as I could walk, all I ever wanted to do was be a professional footballer. So I think it was on my mind day and night for probably from the age of about 3. And probably still is, to be honest. But as a youngster, I played for Brighton and Hove Albion. So I joined the youth team there when I was, I must have been 7 or 8, I think, when I initially joined the youth team. And then played through the academy from 11, signed professional forms with Brighton when I was 16. So kind of didn't go to college, and everything, my sort of life was revolving around becoming a professional footballer. It was all I wanted to do. And from a very young age, that was kind of the journey for me. So it was great. I spent, a number of years playing professional football. So at 16, I signed professional forms and played, I think, until I was about 21. But a number of fairly serious knee injuries actually kind of curtailed my career in football. So I ruptured my ACL 3 times. I've got about 50% of cartilage left in both knees. And the doctor said, look, if you want to walk and have no arthritis and kind of not have to have knee replacements by the time you're 30, we'd recommend that you kind of pack it in. So at probably the age of 22, hung up my boots. And that was a real sort of, I suppose, inflection point for me, because, I'd had pretty much the entirety of my life had been focused on becoming a professional footballer. That was now not an option. So I needed to pivot and kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I ended up falling into kind of sales and relationship management, fell into kind of a number of different jobs, and then ended up working in the financial services sector. And for me, I think that there's always been this kind of there was this unfinished story with football. And it was something that I think was potentially holding me back, and we'll get into it, but it was holding me back. And some of the stories and the feelings that I had around that were preventing me from kind of enjoying what I was doing and making progress in what I was doing. So kind of fast forward to Swift was when I was first introduced to yourself. And I had been doing a lot of reading, learning about leadership, personal development. And a couple of colleagues that I worked with had worked with yourself and sort of recommended that I explore the Quality of Mind program. So that would have been around about 18 months ago now that I did the initial course with yourself. And I think since that point, as I say, purpose of today is to kind of share some of those learnings and where I've gone on that journey. But really, I think for me, kind of a lot of this stems from my, I suppose, progress as a footballer, and then transitioning and pivoting into the kind of professional world of work and finance and business, and letting go of some of those stories and some of the things that I'd probably ingrained and sort of told myself were true. So a lot of that journey, I think, started prior to Quality of Mind, and I was exploring and open to kind of this development opportunity. And then once we kind of get into Quality of Mind, it's certainly been, I think, for me, one of the sort of most profound things that I've gone through, that's helped me and is continuing to help me to get to where I am.
Wonderful. And so I know there's three areas that we're going to explore, and the first one I think is around letting go of stories. You might. So what have you let go of, and what impact has that had on you?
Yes, I think there's two stories I think that I had told myself that I think had an impact on a number of things in my life. So one, I think, was this whole concept of me thinking and almost labeling Lewis Ide as a footballer. So if anyone used to ask me, what would you do? I'm a footballer. That was me. So I had created this story that Lewis was a footballer. And when that was no longer a possibility, I had a bit of an identity crisis. I was like, well, who am I? Like, if I'm not a footballer and I can't play football, who am I? And, for a lot of my life growing up, it was, Lewis has got a lot of potential. He's going to be a great footballer. We're really excited about, where he could grow in his football career. And then to have that taken away, that kind of story of being a footballer was gone. So I think for me, that was one very critical piece, is that I labeled myself as a particular thing. And the second, I think, is probably around the concept of failure. So I think having that label potentially taken away from me, no longer a footballer, I felt, and I think I started to tell myself stories that I was a failure. If I'm not a footballer and Lewis isn't a footballer, well, I failed. I had this objective to be a professional and have a career doing the thing that I loved, and I didn't do it. So I think I'd created this story and this narrative that, I'd failed. And that started to then have almost a knock-on or a domino effect on other things in my life. So, depression is a strong word, but feeling that I hadn't achieved the goals that I wanted, it didn't make me feel good. And that then led to, potentially confidence issues, feelings of self-doubt, this kind of imposter syndrome. As I moved into a new field of work, it was almost like I couldn't let myself be this sort of new version of myself, because it was like, well, Lewis is a footballer, so how can he be a business professional? So I think those two stories, I think, are there's probably many other stories around that, but this concept of labeling myself as a footballer and then this concept or story of failure were kind of two critical areas that, now that I reflect on, I think had quite a big impact on me, kind of making that transition and opening myself up to kind of growth opportunities and the like.
So I'm just reflecting on that, and how we talk about stories, and so it's like this, the subconscious is whirring away, and we're having thoughts. A lot of them are unconsciously being had, that are building this identity of who I am or who I'm not, or what I should be or what I shouldn't be. And it's all being built behind the scenes that I then end up living in, right? And I'm just imagining the stories that you've then got going on, or had going on, and how that drains us. It drains our power, it drains our freedom, it drains our happiness. Yeah, that's what's occurring to me. And we're all doing that on some level, is existing in a story, a thought-created construct of what we are or what we should be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you're sort of draining the power. I think that's one of the big things for me that I've reflected on is subconsciously or consciously letting go of those stories I feel so much more energy. I feel so much more passion for things. I feel, well, I feel energized. And I think that a big part of that is being able to let go of those stories, for sure.
And how have you let go of them? What sort of shifted and how?
Yeah, so it's quite a difficult question to answer. There wasn't kind of a moment where I just went, right, I'm just going to let go of them. I'd love it to be as easy as that, but I think it takes a little bit more than that. I think one of the reflections I have on that is this kind of understanding of me and how my mind and how the mind works. So I think, the kind of concept of creating stories, until I was almost educated or introduced to how the mind actually works, I hadn't realized that I created a story. So I think that initial kind of almost like turning of the page, that this is how the mind works. This is, this is how your mind is working, and the stories that you create, the subconscious, the labeling, the biases, etc. I think being introduced to that concept helped me to have that kind of aha moment where you go, oh, okay, well, maybe I am creating some stories. So it wasn't a case that I was able to just let it go. But I think the first step on that journey was understanding how the mind worked, so that I could see the stories that my mind had created. And then it was I think a continuous journey. And there are still times when, and I do this quite often when I speak at conferences. I might make a little joke that I used to be a professional footballer. So I still sometimes relate to that topic, but I now relate to it from a place of fondness and enjoyment, rather than a place of kind of regret. So I think understanding that the story that I created was one of a negative sort of almost consciousness, and now one that I can see for, I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had, and it's helped me to kind of pick up some skills that maybe others haven't. So I think that initial moment was the realization of how the mind worked, so that I could start to see the stories and see the labeling that I'd done. And then it was a bit of a journey to start understanding and kind of almost changing the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, amazing. And I love your point, really, which is it's about learning about how the mind works. So it's about seeing that we are so we talk about stories, but the mind is creating everything that's being experienced. We're creating our own experience of that. We're creating our own reality. So I'm living in a sea of thought. We call it a story or a reality, but it's like everything. It's like how I experience this time of year, how I experience the climate crisis, how I experience my work in my job, how I experience what my boss says to me or doesn't say to me. I'm constantly living in 70,000 thoughts every day, most of them happening unconsciously behind the scenes, creating this experience that I've got that says Martin's confident, or Martin's not confident, or Martin's happy or not happy, or I'm not excited, or I'm worried, or I'm this, I'm that. Is like this sea of thought it's just seeing that the nature of that is that it's creating whatever it creates, and that it's not really real. It's an internal creation. And so what I'm hearing you say is, when we see that that's just making stuff up, we can shift our relationship to what it's making up and not be gripped by it.
For sure. And that's definitely the angle that I've gone down. And I think the route that I've gone down, and that understanding and then changing the relationship with it has certainly been like I said, big eye opener for me. And yeah.
And how does this flow into one of the things I've experienced about you that caused me to want to have this conversation was that I experienced your confidence and self-assuredness and some assertiveness, you know, in this new role you've got. I experienced it different to how I did when I first met you. Tell me more about that area, what's happened, and how you see yourself now.
Yeah, I think confidence is. Now, I appreciate we've just said that, you know, confidence potentially is a story that we tell ourselves, and but that being said, I feel more confident in myself, I think, as a result of being able to understand and let go of some of those stories. So that the kind of the label of self-doubt or the label of imposter syndrome, I think, always had this nagging effect on me, where it was, you know, I'd make a decision, but was I really sure? Is it the right thing to do, or should I check? Or I'm not 100% sure it's the right. I think being able to kind of understand that a lot of that is driven by a thought that I could let go of or change the relationship with has helped me to be a lot more confident in myself. So that has been a huge shift. But I think that confidence, it comes from a place of, we talk quite a lot about with yourself, Martin, is this kind of inner wisdom. And I think understanding or being able to let go of the stories and have a clear mind to tackle a situation has helped me to be a lot more confident in the decisions that I take and the routes that I go down. So for me, that's been a huge shift. And, you know, maybe I've not even noticed it myself. It's kind of, you've mentioned it, but I do feel more confident because I'm anchored in this kind of place of, you know, no stories, or the stories that are created, I'm able to kind of see them for what they are. So it's reducing those kind of self-doubt, imposter syndrome type scenarios. And I'm confident that if the decisions I'm making are coming from a place of inner wisdom, that I can believe in them, and that I can go 100% in, rather than that kind of nagging, you know, 99% or a little bit of self-doubt. So I think that's been a really big change for me, knowing that a lot of what I'm doing is coming from, you know, a place of inner wisdom or a place of, you know, clear thought that enables me to be, you know, more confident, more self-assured, more assertive when I need to be. I think that's been a big change for me.
So in some ways, we're identifying that there's sort of almost two levels of thought. There's the noise in the head, the story-making machine, the worrying, the overanalyzing, the stressing, the etc., etc., etc. But when we let that quieten down and we see that for what it is, it quietens down. It's like a snow globe that's shaking. And then eventually, when that settles, we can see clearly. And when we see clearly, we access this inner knowing, or this wisdom, or this intuition. And if we go outside rather than looking for the answer outside, if we're looking outside to go, well, what do you think? Or we're not grounded in our own inner knowing. And it sounds to me like you've got good at going inside to work out what you really think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. And it's accessing that wisdom, but also the I think we talk about it again, that this kind of flow state where I'm not over analyzing things. So I'm not taking a situation and spending, you know, like you say, these outside thoughts. What's so and so going to think if I make this decision? Or, you know, is this going to affect my reputation here? Or no, it's actually coming from a place of calmness and quiet and almost not necessarily mindfulness, but being mindful that it's coming from a place within. And that, I think, is helping me to access this kind of flow state where I'm kind of making decisions, or I'm taking actions without having to think too long or too hard about the external factors. It's what I feel is right, and it's kind of almost what the inner me is saying is the right thing to do, or this is going to be the right thing to do. So I think that has certainly helped. And then it helps me with that confidence piece to back myself and say, yeah, this is the right thing to do.
I'm interested in, so, you know, the flow state, being in flow, and in sports, we might call it being in the zone. And I'm interested in your reflections on that, having been a footballer and now in work, and what you notice about, what you notice. similarities,
Yeah.
differences?
So I think the one of the kind of the flow state in sport, it's kind of reacting without thinking. It's, you know, you don't have you know, in fact I listened to a couple of podcasts and read a few books on Kobe Bryant. And in the off season he used to practice every day. You know, he used to shoot I think it was like 1,000 free throws, and he used to practice without an opponent every kind of scenario or situation that he thinks he might encounter, so that when he steps on the court, he doesn't think, he just reacts to the situation in front of him. And it's probably one of the reasons why he was one of the, you know, the greatest basketballers. So I think that's kind of maybe an example of someone being in flow state or being in the zone on the court. You know, every shot he makes, he's not thinking, he's just reacting, or he's just moving. And I think it's quite difficult to kind of transition that into the work world, right? Because, you know, there are lots of decisions to make that, you know, you might need to think about, or that, you know, it's not necessarily always a reaction. But I think one of the examples that I would talk about is kind of like a sales meeting. So if you kind of think about the environment that you might be in, might be me, it might be a colleague, might be 2 or 3 of our customers in the meeting. For me, accessing that flow state is about being present in that room and not having thoughts about, you know, I've got to get home and make dinner, or, you know, the train's going to be running on time. It's about being really present. And that then enables me to, I suppose, to access a few things. One is that connection with the customer or the people that are in the room, because I'm here, I'm present. And then I'm able to react to their reactions. So if I can see that, you know, they've liked something I've said, or maybe they don't agree with something, I can then start to react and be sort of in the room and making not necessarily assumptions because they're stories, but, you know, I can question, I can consult, I can explore, because I'm there and I'm present. And I think that's really, for me, when I talk about, or when I think about flow state, it's being present in that moment and then accessing that kind of energy that comes with being present. I think that's probably one way that I would describe it, and maybe an example there.
Yeah, interesting. And so I think what we would say is that when we're truly present, we're not caught up in any thinking about what we need to control or manage or do. So the flow state naturally arises, and in business, different to sport, but it's still, we work out what to do. We work out whether to flex or to talk or to listen or to yeah, it's like there's all sorts of attributes that are available to us when we're relaxed and present and in the moment.
Exactly. I think that's exactly it. So
tell me about the last area that you wanted to touch on, Lewis.
Yeah, so I think the first two, so the kind of concept of relationship with myself, or, you know, the failure piece, has kind of led me to then be more confident, you know, to be able to access that kind of flow state. The third area, I suppose, maybe is a consequence of those two, but I've been reflecting a lot, maybe in the last 18 months, around what are my values. And really, I suppose that for me is what is it that is important to me? What is it that, you know, gives me energy? What is it that I love, that I'm passionate about? So what are those kind of values? And I think I've only been able to really explore that by letting go of the stories of the past and becoming more, I suppose, present, so that I can see, understand, feel what is important to me. So give you a couple of examples. So I have a son, so he's going to be 10 in February. And I know lots of people say, you know, my family are, you know, one of the most important things to me, which they are. But for me, it was about, okay, so what is it that I value about, you know, my family? You know, I want to be present. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband. So for me, that's a key value. So I want to be there and be present. So, you know, I now spend a lot of time ensuring that I am present. So if I pick my son up from school, you know, he's telling me about his fantastic day, you know, I don't want to be sat there thinking about, you know, oh God, I've got this business meeting on Monday, or, you know, oh, that terrible round of golf that I played last week. So I think being really present is enabling me to kind of see the values like that and make sure that I'm I suppose that I am present and able to not achieve, because it's not necessarily a goal, but if a value is important to me, I want to be able to give it everything that I can. So for me, that's one area I think is around kind of understanding what's important to me. Other areas as I relate to it, so I get a lot of energy from being in nature. So I love being outdoors. I love playing sports. I love, being sort of outside. And for me, that's something that I've understood is quite a big value to me. So what I try to do is spend more time doing and being in the environments that give me energy and that make me feel good. So I think, again, that's another area that I've reflected on is, what is it that gives me energy, and what is it that I'm passionate about? So spending more time doing those things and in those environments. Values is quite a difficult one to talk about, because it's quite hard to label a value or something that you're passionate about, and it's obviously very different for a lot of different people. In the working environment, so values that I have, so I think I reflect quite a lot on this, but things like humility, so being humble is a really big value of mine, and it's something that I hope it's a story, but that I try to practice and make sure that I am humble, because it's a value that I believe in. I think about things like not necessarily work ethic, but working smart is a value of mine. I want to make sure that I can finish my work on time and enjoy the life that we have and enjoy the environments that I like to be in. So I think I spend a lot of time trying to reflect on what are the values, what are the things that drive me, that give me passion, that give me energy. And I think the only way that I've been able to do that is by being present and sort of letting go of some of those stories.
So I love this. And what I see in this world at this moment is a lot of people running very, very fast on the hamster wheel of life, running. And based upon our conditioning from childhood and based upon the societal conditioning, we grow up in a world that says, I must get somewhere, I must have something, I must be someone. And we're running really, really fast, not really questioning why we're running and whether it really makes sense to run. But we're just running. And we're playing out the conditioning that we grew up with. And what I love about what you're talking about is that on this journey of personal development and exploring the mind, and what we've got the opportunity to release the grip from the ego, release the grip from what we think we should do, that we're just running to more consciously live our lives, to more consciously stop and say, hang on a second, what am I doing and why, and what's important to me, and what's really important to me, not just what do I think is important to me.
Yeah.
And all your examples are great examples of just this journey that I think we're both on, where we start to stop and question and live a more conscious life.
Yeah, and in fact, one of my favorite, it's an old boss of mine, one that you know very well. One of his sayings, and he used to use this in a business context, but the more I hear it, the more I think actually it kind of relates to a lot of other things in life. Is slow down to speed up, and I really like that saying, because it's just slow down, be present, understand, reflect, think, and you could be running 1,000 miles an hour. If you're going in the wrong direction, you're going to have to go back the 1,000 miles plus in the right direction, right? So that kind of slow down to speed up concept of, sit with yourself, understand where you want to be, really truly understand what it means and the why. And then when you do go at it, you're going in the right direction, or that it's going to be the right thing for you at that point. And so that's one of the things that I've always sort of enjoyed that saying, yeah. But it has a different meaning to me now than probably when I first heard it maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's not enough space and time that people are taking to stop and to pause and to rest and to to look after themselves, but also to think the quality of our thinking is better when we have space, that we are working slower.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Lewis?
No, do you know what? I think what would be interesting is to see what my reflections would be like a year from now. So I think one of the core areas that I suppose I say I need to work on, it's making sure that this becomes a part of every day, the kind of the reflections and sitting with thoughts and kind of understanding, because, you know, like you say, if you're having 70,000 thoughts a day and you don't take time to reflect for 2 or 3 weeks, that's a hell of a lot of thoughts that have built up over a period of time. So I think one of the areas that I'm focused on is building this into kind of every day, is making sure that, you know, there are going to be days when, you know, stress might creep up on you, and, you know, there might be a few thoughts that start to circulate, but it's about, for me, understanding those cues and those traits that start to happen when that's happening, so that I can start to reflect and kind of sit with those thoughts a little bit more. So I think for me, you know, it is a bit of a practice. You know, it's not a case of you, once you've kind of had the thoughts, then you're free and that's it forever. You know, they will start to creep back in, and it's about, I think, embedding some of those kind of reflection times and, you know, continuing to sit with and speak to people in a similar situation. So, you know, I always get energized whenever we speak, Martin, and I know the same with other people that have been on the course. So for me, I think that I suppose the last piece is just around embedding and practice, and
Yes.
you know, that ongoing commitment to kind of understanding the mind.
Yes, yeah, and invite our listeners to be on that journey, right? It's to understand the mind, and the mind is so immersive in what it creates. The ego's at play all the time. The thinking is always doing something surreptitiously in some way, and so having time to stop and to pause and to contemplate what's driving us, what's happening in us. Yeah, really, really great. Yeah, really important. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.